Well, I'm here with Professor Arthur Brooks, who I've been a fan of for quite some time. And I was listening this morning as I was getting ready to some of the other interviews and speeches that you've done. Professor, you're just remarkable, and you've done such great work. And tell us about your newest book. I think it's your 13th.
Yeah, no, actually my 15th, and I've got my 16th on the way coming out next March, as a matter of fact. But
Wow, that's so much work. We'd love to get into your schedule, how you block out all the different things you're doing, and the company you're building sounds pretty remarkable because I can't think of other people who've built a company like
yeah,
you with all the different
yeah,
ingredients you
no,
have.
it's been thrilling, as a matter of fact, because I've dedicated my career as a behavioral scientist to lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love. Which you have too using flowers, and I've done it using ideas. And so together we have flowers and ideas. And because one of the things that I know as
Happy,
a happiness specialist is that flowers make people happy.
and we've come to the realization here at 1-800-Flowers, and we own a bunch of brands, all of which are in the gifting space. So we own Harry and David and the Popcorn Factory, Cheryl's Cookies, so everything in the gifting space, things remembered, personalization mall. So three categories: floral gifts and baskets, Harry and David food gifts and all the other food gifts in that collection, and then personalized gifts, things remembered and personalization mall. But they're all gifts. And when we came to the realization, I'd say in the last 10 years, been around 50 years next year, that yes, we're in the product business, flowers and gifts, but we're really in the
Yeah,
relationship business. And I think you just pointed that out. People use our products to express themselves and to the important people in their lives. And that changed how we think about marketing, for example. Uh, some people would default to, I'll give a discount to try and stimulate a sale. And I'm asking you this question, but it's my inclination that starting with COVID, I didn't know what to do when COVID first struck and we were all going into lockdown. And a young lady who was my chief of staff at the time said, "Well, why don't you just write a newsletter to our customers instead of, we didn't think we could send out an email saying, hey, if you're locked down, we got something you can buy." So I started writing a newsletter 5 years ago, every Sunday, and I write about relationships. And I call on people like you who actually know what you're talking about, and my friend Dr. George Everly, who I wrote a book with that came out last year. And so I call on all these experts that I've gathered and gotten to know and share their advice with our community. And we use the calendar to give people an excuse to express themselves and connect. So last month was Grandparents' Day, and you and I were just talking about the fact that we're very lucky to be grandparents and how much we enjoy that. And so we used Grandparents' Day, say Grandparents' Day is coming, and if you're a grandparent, don't just sit there waiting to see if you get a call, or you get a card, you get a gift, you get a hug. Be
right.
proactive and tell your grandkids Grandparents' Day is coming, and I want to give you a gift of my time. Let's pick out something we can do together one on
Right.
one. So we write about things like that. It's all about
Yeah.
relationships and using the calendar as an excuse to reach out to somebody and connect. And we always start our recommendations with things you can do that are
Right.
free. And then we walk up the ladder. If you want to send this and it costs $5, you want to send this. If you want to send a nice big bouquet, we have that. But we always start with five things that you can do for free. But so our raison d'etre has become helping people to have more and better
Yeah, love it.
relationships, stimulating them, prompting them, reminding them, helping them to think about their yearly resolution. You're going to work out more, you're going to eat better, you're going to read a book a month. What are you going to do about the 15 or 20 or 30 relationships in your life that are important? Some that have
Right.
waned, how are you going to reinvest in a few of those? Some that you want to maintain, and others that you want to create and work on that you don't have now. But how do you design a plan that you're deliberate about it? And I've read, Professor, that you are very maniacal about documenting your happiness plan, your journey, and you have a great rigor around that. Could you give us a little color on that?
And by the way, everything you're telling me about your ideas that you were sending out in the newsletter are very well documented in the neuroscience and behavioral science literature. Jim, you're a natural behavioral scientist, I'm telling you. And of course, you've gained a lot of data over the years. But I've studied things. For example, one of the things that I've studied a great deal is how to turn your money into happiness, and why Mother Nature actually tells you to do the wrong thing. But when you think more deeply about it and stand up to your natural inclinations, you can do the right thing. Because there's four ways that you can buy happiness, And there's only 5 ways you can spend your money. The problem is that Mother Nature wants you to use your money to do the one thing that doesn't buy happiness, which is buying stuff for yourself. The 4 things that do bring happiness are buying experiences and spending them with the people you love, buying time and doing edifying things, usually with the people that you love, by giving your money away or buying things and for people that you love, like flowers. And last but not least is to save your money because you want a better future for yourself and the people that you love. In other words, if you turn your money into an expression of love, you win. And if you turn it into an expression of, trying to prove to yourself that you're worthwhile or important, you don't win, is the whole point. And you did that with your business. You were in that second basket.
I heard your podcast with Scott Galloway, and I've met Scott a couple of times. I think he's a great podcast and a good thinker and teacher like you are. He recently talked about getting to his number, which was enough, that he could put a little star on his chest and say, I've accomplished this, and above that, I'm going to give it away. I'm going to treat other people other things. So he sounds like the two of you are singing out of a similar hymnal. Have you done the same thing?
Sort of, although, people who are trying to get to a particular number to have enough, they generally never hit their number because their number keeps moving.
Well, it doubles every
Yeah,
couple of years.
it turns out that that's a hard number to hit because that's a static number. And ordinarily, what's actually going on is wanting to have enough, wanting to hit the number. That's a little bit of an obsession with security, and
Yes,
security is a funny idol, is how that works.
especially if you grew up without
Yeah, and what
security.
you find is that there are two groups of people that have that financial security idol. Those people who grow up with nothing and those people who grow up rich are the two groups of people. And the reason is because the first one is motivated by fear of not having enough, and the
Hmm.
other is fear of not feeling like they're enough, is what it comes down to. So those are the two, and people really need to work against it. So I don't talk to people about what the number is. What I talk to people about is actually how to crowd out that entire idol, is how to crowd it out by having so much love in your life that's what you want. That's what you're thinking about all the time anyway. So you don't have to basically say, okay, now I got to stop. I'm going to think about this until I have these $20 million or $100 million or $5 million or whatever the number is. And then I'm going to go love people. No, 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 no. Sorry.
Hmm.
You do not need to be rich to love people.
I would argue that you have a
Oh,
better
yeah.
shot at
Oh,
getting
yeah,
rich
totally.
if you have compassion and care
Here's
for
the
other people.
thing, Jim, that I tell my students. We live under the illusion, and this is not the fault of capitalism, which I believe strongly in as a system that brings dignity to people. This is not a problem with capitalism. This is human nature. This is Mother Nature, who
Hmm.
doesn't care if we're happy at all. She just wants us to survive and pass on our genes. She's a real tyrant. And I tell my students, like, my students are MBA students at Harvard, by the way. These are going to be the masters.
Yep.
They want to
Well, you teach both in the business school
I
and in the
do.
Kennedy
Yeah, I
School?
do. And I teach MBA students at the business school a class on the science of happiness. And my students want to grow up
Hmm.
and be Jim McCann. That's what they want. They want to have your kind of success.
Old and bald?
Yeah, it's me too, brother.
Not the old part.
I'm getting there. And so what I tell them is, like, Mother Nature tells you, and you believe that if you have worldly success, which means money, power, pleasure, and fame or prestige, then you will
Uh-huh.
automatically be happy. And that's wrong. Here's the right formula. And this formula makes them panic a little bit. You're going to see why right now. I say, shoot for happiness, and then you'll be successful enough. And they say, enough? See, the problem is that they're stuck at this idea that there's never enough because they think there's a number. That gets back to that idea that there's a number. If you think that there's a number, then you're going to put on hold all of your love relationships until you have enough stuff. And it's never too soon. Your love relationship should always come first. Always, always, always come first. And then you won't worry about the number.
Let's touch on love. Just hearing you say that word reminded me of something I wanted to ask you about. I had the opportunity to speak with a fellow I've been a fan of for 40 years, Dr.
Mhm.
Dean Ornish. And he spoke about, and I've not heard in your work you mention this, so I must have missed it, but he talked about the health benefits, both physiological and mental, of
Yeah.
monogamy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's, by the way, that's especially true for men. It's super true for women, but it's even more true for men, which is really interesting.
No kidding. I would not have gone
No, I
there.
know, and it's a really interesting thing because what you find is when you look at men and you look at the average, you look at the optimal number of sexual partners for men in a year that is associated with maximum happiness. That number is one. And that's
Yeah.
not what Mother Nature tells men. Again, this is not the fault
Mm-hmm.
of the culture. This is not the fault of the economy. It's Mother Nature who's saying lots of variety, pass your genes around, gene propagation, survive,
Mm-hmm.
make sure your DNA survive. These are natural proclivities to be sure, but humans have two, with our big prefrontal cortex, we have both animal instincts and moral aspirations. We're the only animals that have animal instincts and moral aspirations. And we can choose to
Sure.
live in moral aspirations as opposed to animal instincts. And that's the whole idea. So men in particular, they're driven toward non-monogamy, but monogamy is the happiest setup for men and women. It gives the greatest sense of security, it's the greatest sense of belonging. Plus,
It's an essential ingredient for
I
genuine
mean, man,
commitment.
it's like
And genuine commitment is an ingredient for, I would guess,
you
happiness,
get
huh?
to live with your best friend for the rest of your life. I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want that? Like I tell young people today, they're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna kind of play the field until I'm in my 30s." I'm like, "Why would you put off your happiness like that? Why would you postpone 10 years of your happiness?" On the contrary, I mean, it's like find the love of your life, make it as good as you can, become best friends, which takes 3 to 5 years to get what's called true.
Is that right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, for
scientific?
sure. So what happens is that there's a neurochemical cascade that makes people fall in love, and that's the bonding process of passionate love. It starts with the exchange of sex hormones, so testosterone and estrogen. Men and women both have both. That leads to attraction. The second part is the catecholamines, is the neuromodulators in the brain, but especially norepinephrine and dopamine, which give you a sense of anticipation and euphoria about the other person. Then you go into a stage where your serotonin levels drop. That makes you ruminate on the other person. It looks a lot like clinical depression with ruminative thinking, but that makes you bond to the other person. Then after that, you start to become kin in a way, which is through oxytocin and vasopressin. Oxytocin, women have 3 times as much. That's the bonding hormone. Vasopressin is the loyalty hormone, which men have more of than women. And when you do all these things, then you fuse together. What you really want to get to over the 3 to 5 years is this thing called companionate love, where it's still plenty passionate. I mean, you've been married for how many years? 50 years, something like that. Yeah,
50,
man, that's
yep. Mm-hmm.
fantastic. Still plenty passionate, but you're best friends. And that's what you really want to get to. And that's where happiness really resides. And the earlier you do it in your 20s, the more time you get to enjoy it for the rest of your life.
Well, we committed early, started a
Yeah,
family
it's great.
early. Uh, but it does now. How do you balance that? Your students are going to be the top of the top there at Harvard, and they're in their late 20s, some of them early 30s, approaching 30, I guess. They've worked for a few years after undergraduate school. How many of them are married?
About 15% of our students are married. My average,
See,
yes,
that's
low.
low
They're 28.
for their age bracket.
They're on average
Yeah.
28 years old. The ones from certain groups are almost all married. So I have a lot of the Latter-day Saints kids from Utah.
Oh,
Yeah,
is that right?
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a big pipeline from Utah to Harvard, and
Oh,
they
no
all
kidding.
take my happiness class, and they're all married and have kids by the time they're in the program.
Yep.
There's a lot from Latin America. A lot of the Latin American students are married. A lot of the foreign students are married.
Hmm.
Actually, they come with their spouses. They
Yep.
come a little bit older.
So it sounds then that the U.S. kids are disproportionately single.
So yeah, that would be true. That would be true. But they don't want to be. This is the one thing is they don't want to be. And the thing that I've seen over the past 30 years since I got my PhD and been a behavioral scientist is that they're less and less and less competent at managing the business of their lives when it comes to these funny areas of meaning. So there's a lot of new.
Well, that's counterintuitive because they've been so good at managing their educational track, their career track to get into a wonderful school like yours, and they seem to have focus on career and plotting. Okay, I'm going to achieve this, and I'll have that. Then I'll find somebody, and then I'll get married. You know, the average age of affluent kids getting married is
Yeah.
getting later and later. Their optionality then for children is getting challenged by Mother Nature, and lots of them are really struggling to
Yeah.
have children.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And it's just like having the financial number before you can actually start doing your philanthropy and loving other people. If you're basically going to,
But you're preaching about finding someone whenever it's
absolutely.
appropriate, and committing to family and children. Sounds like you might be the only one preaching
You
that
know,
at
I mean,
Harvard.
there's a few of us. There's a few of us holdouts, Jim. I mean, there's a few of us that are talking about this because, man, I got the data. I'm a social scientist. I'm not talking about this as a moralist. I'm a traditionally religious person, but that's not the perspective that I'm coming from. I do this work as a matter of my research, and I want my students to be happy, and I want more happiness in the world. And happiness is
Yep.
love, full stop. If you're putting off your love because you're trying to get to your financial number or your career number or trying to meet your worldly ambitions, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong.
So you touched on it, saying love is happiness. Give us a little. I'm sure you've done this a million times, but help us understand, how should we think about happiness? Is it an emotion? Is it a feeling? Is it a state of being? It's probably the question you get most.
And actually, weirdly, it's a question that I should get more. The biggest mistake that people make about happiness is thinking that it is a feeling. They think they know what it is, which is chasing a feeling, the feeling of ebullience, the feeling of joy. And it's not. Joy is a basic positive emotion, but that's simply a response from your limbic system saying that you have sensed that something is an opportunity and you should approach it. That's all joy is. That's a feeling. Happiness isn't a feeling any more than the smell of the flowers you sell are the flowers. You sell two
Hmm.
dozen roses. They smell great, but the smell isn't the roses. The
Cool.
roses are a real thing. The smell is evident.
Is happiness
Yes,
measurable
it is. So
physiologically,
happiness is a
chemically?
combination of three phenomena that are measurable and that we have studied scientifically. It's a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the three
Mm.
macronutrients, like the protein, carbohydrates, and fat of happiness. And when you're doing those things well, you get a lot of joy. You also get a lot of pain, by the way. You get a lot of suffering too. Happiness has unhappiness in it, which is really important, right? It's just like, a good
Well,
cake also has some salt in it. And you need that.
you spoke with someone I heard you with talking about depression, and you said we all have depression, and that seems like what you're talking about
Yeah.
here in enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. It's going to have
Yes.
some toughness in it too. It can't be all roses, pardon the pun. But when I heard you talk about that, I wondered if we're not over focusing on depression, and everyone is diagnosable as having some form of depression. You talked about it's a question of
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, everybody, it's like these so-called maladies, what they are just, states of negative emotion. Negative emotion is an alarm system saying that something isn't right and that you need to avoid something or deal with something or learn and grow from something is what it comes down to. Now, these negative emotions can be dysregulated. Absolutely. And when they're dysregulated, you need to pay attention to that. The problem is defining yourself with respect to your negative emotion, one, and number two, thinking something's wrong with you because you have this negative emotion. And then number three, trying to eliminate the negative emotion. These are huge mistakes that people are making. And this is what's propelling this generation of people that is so much unhappier than people were in previous generations. People are not unhappier because there's less justice in the world or there are bigger problems in the world. I mean, Jim, you and I can go back and we talk to people. It's like, hey, remember when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire? You want environmental problems? We had to, roll up the windows on the freeway so that the kids wouldn't have asthma. I mean, I get it. There's problems, but there's always been problems. That's actually not it. That's actually not what's going on. The problem is number one, something is provoking a lot more negative emotionality than has been in the past. And then number two, we don't understand negative emotionality and we have the wrong approach to managing it, learning from it, growing from it, and dealing with it. And you take those two things together, we got a catastrophe on our hands.
From gratitude to comfort, new beginnings to birthdays, Celebrate life's moments with something special. Find the perfect gift at Harry and David. We make it easy to be thoughtful. You talked about something that I've been preaching almost my whole adult life, certainly since I'm a parent. And I was a shy kid, and the way I worked to overcome shyness is I put myself in roles where I had to deal with the public, but I had a role. So I worked at I grew up in South Queens, and there was a big, successful men and boys clothing store. So I worked there as a kid in high school and college, and frankly, even after I started the flower business, Father's Day wasn't a busy weekend for us in the flower business. So I'd go and work in the men and boys clothing store called Dadson's, because the gang was a great group to be around, and terrific guys, and I learned so much from them. But if you were shy, you'd starve because you had to sell. And you had to build relationships and regular customers and drop them notes. And, hey, something came in, I think you'd like, so you learn to overcome it. But I had a role. And the second thing I did as a knock-around job before I started a career was work as a bartender. Bartender is the center of the action. He or she has a role to play. They don't have to think about what they're doing. They're busy. And their job is to help other people. So I've grown up as a parent teaching my kids the best way to overcome shyness is you go to a cocktail party. You don't know anybody. You're uncomfortable. Find somebody in the room who's standing by themselves. Go make them feel comfortable. And you tell people to go, if you're feeling lonely, go find a lonely person and help them. And when I read that, I said, I've been preaching that instinctually. I didn't realize the foundation for it. And you talk about the chemical release that you get by helping somebody.
And oxytocin, dopamine, changes in serotonin. I mean, it's manifest that it's good for your brain. But this is the same principle that you brought up before about what to do on Grandparents' Day. Don't wait around for people to call you up and say, Grandpa, happy Grandparents' Day. Reach out
or be hurt if they forgot.
That's exactly.
Why set yourself up?
Grandparents' Day is an opportunity for you to do something nice for your grandkids. That's what it is. Because every day is an opportunity for you to actually take the reins and actually go do something great.
And if you tell them ahead of time, they might remember the day.
But you don't even have to game it. It's interesting because, my mother-in-law of blessed memory, I loved her like I love my own mother. She would take all these, her birthday was her opportunity to give people presents. Yeah. She would take all her friends out for lunch. She was a teacher. She'd take all the other teachers out for lunch on her birthday because it was like the day that she wanted to celebrate. It's like, it's my birthday. I get to give stuff to everybody. But that's the whole point. Mm-hmm. I mean, the truth is you will be miserable if you think about yourself. You will. So you have to think about yourself sometimes because you got to get yourself to work and, figure out how you're going to make a paycheck, et cetera. But you will only be happy if you spend more time observing the outside world and serving others. That's called transcendence. And to be transcendent of yourself is the secret to greatest happiness, which is why, by the way, people are so much happier after they've spent the money on flowers than before they spent the money on the flowers.
Sure. And when the loop is closed and you come home and get that big hug, or you get that call or the text saying, you are too much. You just made my day. Who else's day was made?
I know. And by the way, Jim, I've got a trick for everybody who's watching us, who's your customers. I got a trick. So, what I would do is every time there's this whole in relationships, romantic relationships, there's a literature on what the most successful couples have in common. Now, when you're in a relationship, you're feeling two things: approach and avoidance. Approach is, I want to be near you. Avoidance is, I've had enough of you. And you're always going back and forth. This is normal.
And what about how does a fear of rejection play in there as you're doing that ritual?
That can be pretty complicated because you're so afraid of being rejected that what you're doing.
I'll give a little bit more and see.
Kind of avoiding, even though you want approach. So you want approach, but you're avoiding. That's kind of a complicated variation on this thing. But even when you're married to somebody, you have both approach and avoidance. The most successful couples, when they're feeling avoidance, they practice approach. When you're feeling like you want to avoid her, that's when you say, bring it in. So, having seen these data for years and years and years, and I'm like as I take my dying breath, I'm going to be laying my eyes on my beautiful wife. That's what I want. That's my goal. That's my before I go to heaven. Right before I go to heaven, I'm going to be looking at Esther. That's what I get.
But when young people in your class hear you say that, I wonder what they're thinking about maybe I've been wrong
Yeah, no,
about
they get
this.
all dreamy when I say that. They get super
Yeah,
dreamy when I say that because they believe me.
guys and
Oh
gals,
yeah, yeah. Well,
or it must be a
65% of my
difference.
students are women, and they're into it. And the guys too. They want it
Yeah.
too. They want it. They just don't know what it is. So this is what we're talking about. Okay, so back to this strategy. When you're feeling hostile, that's when you go out of your way to do something especially beautiful. So I have one touch ordering with 1-800-Flowers, right? And
Hmm.
every time I'm really super annoyed with Esther, I would like hit on the app, boom, flowers go to my house. She figures it out. Of course she figures it out because she's smart. And she'll be like, she gets the flowers, she calls me up and say, "What's wrong?" Right? So I say, "Okay. So here's what I did to actually break the cycle. When nothing was wrong at all, I sent flowers 3 days in a row."
She was so suspicious of
He's
what
like,
you'd done.
what'd you do? You're having an affair?
Clever move. I
Yeah,
like it.
they never
I
expect the second and then the third.
you're so being so honest and open like that with your students and with your community. Another place you're open and honest, and I really want to go to, is
Yeah,
your faith, the importance of faith. And you talk about the four necessary ingredients for happiness, and faith
right.
being first. And I love your being out there, converting to Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, and how important it is, and how proud you are of that. It reminds me of how you said that you tell your class you can't wait to see your wife. You're so in love with your wife. It's brazenly open and revealing. And in my life, one of the regrets I have is that I was raised Roman Catholic. My wife's a Presbyterian. Uh, she has a more practice of her faith more than I do, and we didn't. We our kids went to a Catholic grammar school and a little bit, and when my daughter went to Catholic high school, but we didn't really stress
Right.
religion enough with them. And I'm going to tell you what I'm proudest of. What we are proudest of is all three of our kids, and frankly, all three of our in-laws. They're all good
Yeah.
parents, and we had a family health issue last year, and it continues, of course, but good now. And I'm especially proud of that. I see my kids experimenting with making sure that they're bringing religion and faith into their
Yeah.
kids' lives. And I'm very proud. We haven't talked about it, but I'm very proud of the fact that I see them being deliberate about that
Right.
now. I'd love to hear how you came to your
Yeah. No,
faith.
I was raised in a strong Presbyterian home, actually, but an evangelical home. All of my grandparents were from missionary families. All
Hmm.
evangelical missionary families. One side, they were missionaries to the Zulus in South Africa. The other side, they were missionaries in the Navajo Nation in New Mexico.
Wow.
That's where my father was born, is in the Navajo Nation.
But you grew up in
I
Washington
did
State.
because my parents, they met in college at Seattle Pacific College, and then they,
Mm-hmm.
they married. My dad wound up as a professor back at that college, as a matter of fact. So I grew up in Seattle. I was born in
Mm-hmm.
Spokane, but I grew up in Seattle, and so I grew up in a very religious home. But I had a kind of a mystical experience as a teenager, and I don't know if it's childhood rebellion or what it is, but I'm glad it happened because I had kind of a mystical experience at the Shrine of Guadalupe in Mexico City, and it was kind of revealed to me that I was Catholic. And one of the things that I really love about America, I love so many things about America. I'm telling you, Jim, I know you do too, is that we have kind of a free market for souls. There's competition. And competition is good. It brings out the best in everybody. It brings out excellence. And I have to say, I just love competition. I mean, I'm sure competition made you successful, because there was not just one flower
Of
shop
course.
out there, for Pete's sake, right? Because if there were, then flowers would be expensive and ugly, probably.
Yep.
And so the result of it was that I found my own faith in my own way, and I was able to build my own life. Now I married a girl who was Catholic. She's Spanish, but she wasn't
Mm-hmm.
practicing, and that was always really hard. And so I was just pushing and pushing and pushing. And by the time we were in our 30s, she was starting to practice. And then our kids, they don't remember their mom not practicing their faith, and they're cradle
Right.
Catholics. But I tell you, as a social scientist, people often ask me, what can I do that will help ensure that my kids practice the faith? And there's actually one thing that's really clear. Now, a lot of people, even if their parents don't practice the faith very much, their kids will. But there's
Yes.
one thing that is a real guarantee for everybody who's listening to us, and that's not what the parents say about it at all. It's what they see, especially their father doing. You know,
Especially the
especially the
father.
father. There's about a 40 percentage point gap between the father and the mother in witnessing the behavior of faith and the influence that it
Mm,
has on the children growing up to be faithful themselves. And there is a reason for this. Your dad, when you're little, is the most power. It depends. I mean, like maybe your mom's bigger than your dad, or maybe you only have a mom. Is the most powerful adult in your life. And seeing them in submission before something greater has a huge cognitive impact. When I was a kid, I thought my dad was so big that he could
he-
lift.
he- he's a
Yeah, I thought he could lift
giant.
the house. And he
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
math professor, Jim. He could not lift the house. But let me tell you, and he was a strong guy, and he would not have been on his knees in front of any other man. But my dad was on his knees next to my bed every night, saying his
Interesting.
prayers, and that had a huge impact on a little dude. There's something bigger
Yeah.
than my dad, and what it means to be a man is to bow in reverence before the Lord. I saw it. It didn't matter what he said. I don't remember anything he told me. But I sure remember
Mm,
that because that's what affects it. And it's the same thing with anything, by the way. If you don't want your kids to grow up and be a drunk, never have them see you drunk. If you want your kids to see you being an honest person, never let them see you cheating on your taxes or cheating in golf. Never, never. Be
hmm.
completely impeccable because they'll notice that, and that's what they'll grow up to be because that's what being an adult will mean to them.
I had an experience recently. Our first home, for 16 years, we lived in a nice community in Eastern Queens, and one of our backyard neighbors still lived there, and their two sons were close with our two sons growing up, and they stayed connected. And we moved away from there almost 30 years ago. And recently, the parents, who were our friends, a guy wandered into their house, forced his way in, and killed the both of them. And it was a terrible story here in New York for about 4 weeks ago. And my wife went to the wake on Friday. We were out east. We were having a end of the season party out at our beach house, and I knew my son was going to the funeral on Saturday. And although I had a million things to do to get ready for this party for a whole lot of people at our house, I said to my wife, "I know our son is going." I said, "I can't not go." So I got up real early, got a bunch of my chores out of the way, showered and changed, and drove in. It's about an hour and 40 minutes each way. But I was so glad I went when I got to the church. It was packed, and my son had texted me, I'm already here. I saved a seat for you up on the side. Just standing together with him at that church, and then with his friend whose parents had been killed outside, to hear them so thankful that you came back to express yourself. But I found myself standing in the church thinking about the strength that family needs, and about surrendering to the question of, is there a power beyond us? Uh, Social scientists, some people would argue scientists should be sure why there's not, and yet I hear more and more scientists tell me my science training teaches me that there has to be a superior being.
No, and these are different kinds of problems. I mean, people ask me a lot. My life as a scientist is based on a reason, and it really is. How does that relate to faith? And the answer is that you can't actually find the object of faith within the reason. And it's kind of like this. If I were a scholar of Picasso, I would need to know two things. I would need to know about Picasso's paintings, and I would need to know about Picasso the man. But I wouldn't be able to find any evidence of Picasso the man in his paintings. And that's the science that I work on. I work on the great creation that is humanity and the behavior of human beings. And I got the data and I run experiments. And that's what I think about all day long. But I can look and look and look and look, and I'm not going to be able to find the author of that science. That's something that comes to me by other means. And we actually understand more and more how that works, how the brain works. The science that I do is largely governed by the left hemisphere of my brain, which is the analysis and the efficiency and the technology part of my brain. The right part of my brain is what's called the numinous. That is the mystery, the why questions, the things that really matter, but they can't be quite articulated. This is the part of your brain that says, go live this way, go find the answers to these questions. And then the left side of your brain goes and finds the answers to the questions. That's what it comes about. So my religious nature is my right hemisphere, which goes beyond articulation and data. The left hemisphere is celebrating all the good things that God does in the world, is how it comes about. And this is my whole brain together makes up the person that I think I'm supposed to be.
I read something where you talked about saying the
Right.
rosary. And just, sometimes some people, you could have a question about things for a long, long time, and someone who you like and respect frames a response to a question or a point of view about something that just unlocks a little way you think. And when you spoke about what the role of repeating a rosary is, it it changed how I thought about prayer.
Yeah.
Tell us how do you use prayer?
So prayer has been used for thousands of years in almost every tradition to access the numinous in your brain, to access the parts of your life that you can't quite crack open with rational thinking. And that's one of the reasons that, I have worked very closely for 12 years with the Dalai Lama. And,
I've heard
yeah, and
that.
they
Yeah.
practice, meditation that's much the same way with a lot of repeated syllables, for example, or Vipassana meditation or anything with a mantra is the way that this works. And that kind of single point.
And clinicians talk about
Yeah.
humming stimulating the
Yes.
vagus nerve.
And there is something to
So
that,
is
but
this?
the whole point is
Mhm.
that you want to have access to the darker parts of your consciousness. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not the parts that are just really hard to understand. And these techniques have always worked is how it is it's really important. So I start each day by going to mass. I go to mass every morning. I went to mass with my wife this morning in Virginia then I went to the airport, and I'm in Alabama right now. And then while I was on the airplane, I prayed my rosary. And before I go to sleep tonight on the phone, my wife and I will pray the rosary again together before we both go to sleep. Why? Because we want jointly to have access to the right hemisphere of our brains, which we believe is a better connection to the divine. And one way or the other, it certainly is a much better way for us to have a deep understanding of our lives that goes beyond all analysis. That's a really important thing. Now, for people who don't know, the Rosary is 1,000-year-old Catholic meditation where you're repeating the same prayers again and again and again while
But
contemplating.
that's it. It's a meditation. It's not a
No, no, it's a
recital.
it's a meditation, and you're saying prayers that are memorized while contemplating scenes from the life of Jesus and his Blessed Mother, again and again and again. You pray the Hail Mary prayer and the Our Father prayer and the Glory Be prayer, and it's very meditative, it's very rhythmic, and it's very musical. And in so doing, you find you have access to information that goes beyond your telling, and it's an amazing for me as a scientist. It's an extraordinary phenomenon, but it's something that I really depend on for the quality of my life.
You get to live your
Sure,
happiness journey
absolutely.
in public
Yeah,
view, sharing it with
yeah,
everyone. It's rewarding and fulfilling for you in
yeah,
many, many ways, but it keeps you on
yeah,
your
totally.
program.
I'm completely. I mean, to be a jerk is really off brand for me. I have to say, you know. And but it's kind of amazing because for a long time I did ordinary behavioral science as an academic for many years, and then I was a CEO for a long time. I ran a think tank in Washington D.C.
Didn't you do that for
Yeah,
10
11
years?
years. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
it was a thrill. But when I retired in my mid 50s, I was very at loose ends. And I felt like God had a purpose for me, and I didn't know what it was. So I did what people have done, what Christians have done for more than 1,000 years to find out what we're supposed to do. I went and I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is an ancient pilgrimage all the way across northern Spain, hundreds of miles. And the belief is that if you go with the intention, Lord, guide my path, what do you want from me, Lord, you'll understand it by the end of your pilgrimage. And sure enough, as I was entering into Santiago de Compostela on the last day, where the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, the ancient cathedral, where the remains of Saint James, the brother of Saint John, are held, that I believe I was given the knowledge that I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life, all of my remaining days, lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love using science and ideas. And I walked away from that job. I took a job teaching at Harvard, but most importantly, I mean, I'm traveling, doing hundreds of talks, and
You're a well-paid
yeah,
missionary.
sure, yeah. And the great part about that is that that I can do all kinds of stuff with that too, right? Like
Yeah,
buy a
yeah.
lot of flowers for Mrs. B. But
Love it.
it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful that I get to spend the rest of my life using the expertise which I've been privileged to be able to accumulate as a professor, as a researcher, and use it in the service of mankind, and use it in the service of my sisters and brothers around the world who need greater happiness and love and faith and fidelity and all the things that are actually going to bring them the best lives.
I think that's a great note to end on. Getting ready to have our conversation today was interesting and really rewarding for me. And then to have the opportunity to spend an hour with you is the cherry on the sundae. You're a terrific guy. You're doing the good work, and there's so many things to admire and respect about you and learn from you. And even this old dog is learning a lot from you.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Thank you,
that
Jim.
gift of
What a
learning.
privilege it is, and I didn't meet you before today, but you've blessed me again and again and again, and you've given me a happy marriage.